Chapter 1. First Contact and the Weapon of Ages. The colossal ship froze to spectators as it crossed the void, engulfing the Argent as it made its way toward the planet below. Flames marked its destined fate as rips and tears opened across its fractured hull, illuminating the dark expanse of space with a powerful, flickering glare. Thick plumes of smoke trailed behind it, encasing the shields in a firestorm, as the streaks and series of small explosions grazed by the Orion station. A young technician on the observation deck of Orion, wide-eyed, whispered to his crewmate, "That's an Argent class, isn't it? Taken down in moments." The Argent continued to plummet through the atmosphere of Aresk, its hull buckling under the relentless onslaught. Crimson laser bolts and streaks of plasma fire ricocheted across its armored shell, peeling away thick plating layer by layer. The Aryan mountains loomed beneath, jagged peaks blanketed in frost and shadow, awaiting the vessel's descent with cold anticipation. Inside the dimly lit command bridge, claxons blared and sparks rained from overloaded consoles. Commander Lyra Vale gripped the edge of her control panel, steadying herself as another volley from their pursuers hammered the spear's starboard thrusters. The hull groaned, a low, agonizing sound of metal surrendering under pressure. Shields at 12% and falling. Lieutenant Kale shouted over the chaos, his voice cracking from fear. "They're pushing us straight into the mountains. Evasive systems aren't responding. Reroute power from the auxiliary cores to the forward thrusters," Lyra ordered, her voice uncertain but calculated. "We're not going down like this, not without a fight." The view outside filled with the ambient glow of weapon fire. Through the swirling clouds, jagged peaks grew closer, menacingly sharp against the bleak, fading light. The sensor array flashed a warning of an incoming antimatter beam splitter, and Lyra felt every reverberation as it made impact with the port wing, sending the ship into a violent turbulence. They were seconds from ground impact. "All hands, brace for emergency landing," Lyra yelled, her mind racing through all emergency protocols, hoping for anything to stabilize their descent. "This is it, people. Thank you for your service." The mountains grew closer as the Argent continued in its descent through the final layer of atmosphere, smoke and fire trailing behind it. Spectators watched from afar from battle consoles. The Argent struck the mountain, surging a massive impact that echoed across the war plains. In that moment, the fusion core detonated, releasing a blinding red flash, whose brilliance overshadowed space, coloring the frontier with an eerie, ghastly glow. For the few lost, silence fell, as if the world itself had been taken. The Battlestar commander watched with trance-like captivation, with light of the inferno reflecting in his eyes. He'd seen battles before, but nothing like this, a massive Argent-class carrier, reduced to ashes in seconds over the new superweapon of the Yuzan Vong. The void of space erupted with a shattering wave of light and energy as capital ships from both sides oriented themselves for a brutal, direct confrontation. Explosions flared across the horizon as orbital cannons discharged in quick succession, beams slicing through the darkness and crashing into enemy hulls, tearing armor like parchment. The massive destroyers and battlecruisers maneuvered carefully, broadsides facing one another as they exchanged relentless torrents of fire. Beneath the colossal capital ships, squadrons of starfighters emerged from docking ports, as shields crackled with static interference. Starfighters blistered through enemy lines, while engines throttling at high maximum, burning through the remains. The pilots' voices crackled across the comms, coordinating maneuvers, calling targets, urging each other on. But within moments, silence hit like a physical blow. The enemy had jammed their frequencies, cutting the squadrons off from each other and their command ship. The pilots were left to rely on instinct and sheer nerve as they raced through a storm of laser fire, their ships weaving between blinding explosions and twisting fragments of blasted hulls. A single moment of hesitation was fatal. Many starfighters went silent, flickering away from the radar as they plunged into enemy fire, reduced to burning fragments. With the comms jammed, the airspace became hostile and alien. The invading fleet was massive, and the overwhelming scale of its forces soon became clear. An enormous flagship loomed at the center of the assault, a fortress in the stars with wings of starfighters emerging in organized waves. Imperial destroyers and dreadnoughts formed its vanguard, pushing forward with relentless aggression, battering through the Republic's frontline defenses. Despite their massive size, they moved with terrifying precision, positioning themselves to cut off escape routes and form a wall of fire that advanced steadily. The Republic's capital ships, powerful and well-shielded, began to falter under the pressure, their shields flickering and hulls buckling as they attempted to hold the line. In the chaotic crossfire, one Republic cruiser, Valor's Star, took a direct hit to its core, sending a shockwave through its decks and tearing it nearly in two. The Republic fleet watched helplessly as the cruiser's remains drifted into the fray, colliding with nearby vessels and casting burning shrapnel into the dogfight. Yet the Republic pilots pressed on, ignoring the static and radio silence, flying in tight formations through instinct alone, risking everything to hold back the tide. Starfighters from both sides spiraled around one another, locked in deadly engagements as they dodged capital ship fire that lit up the blackness. The battle stretched endlessly, each moment escalating with daunting explosions and new casualties. As another Republic battleship detonated in a flash of white-hot fire, the enemy fleet pressed forward, undeterred, slowly surrounding the remaining defenders. The Republic's last fighters regrouped on the edge of the battlefield, their ranks thin but unafraid, prepared to fight to the last. Their shields were battered, their fuel reserves low, but as the invaders closed in, they prepared for a final stand. A desperate energy filled the cockpit of every remaining pilot, a fierce determination as they stared down the wall of enemy ships encroaching on all sides. The galaxy itself seemed to stop as the stars were drowned in fire, metal, and sheer destruction, the final, furious clash underway in the silence of space. The holographic broadcast filled the Senate chamber, casting shadows on the worried faces of those watching. Mon Mothma stood at the head of the assembly, her posture dignified yet strained as the image of a fleet of alien ships, a dark, imposing armada bristling with weaponry, hovered over the platform. The reporter's voice, calm and collected, relayed the details as citizens across Coruscant tuned in to hear of this new, looming threat. Today, near the edge of the Outer Rim, a new species has made its violent introduction to the galaxy. Reports confirm a brutal attack on outlying colonies, each swept aside with ruthless efficiency. The scale of this invasion remains unknown, but early intelligence suggests this warlike faction has unified under a single leader, one whose motivations cannot be determined. Mon Mothma clasped her hands, her gaze unwavering as she addressed the assembled senators, military leaders, and Holoricorders. We stand on the edge of yet another unknown. With the remnants of the Empire still lurking, the appearance of these Yuuzhan Vong threatens not only peace but the fragile stability we've worked so hard to rebuild. We must respond swiftly, in unison, if we are to protect our people. From her seat beside Mon Mothma, Hera Syndulla watched intently. The seasoned general's expression was a mix of steely determination and quiet unease, as she took in the display of alien warships on the hologram. Hera had seen too many battles, too many wars, and her mind raced as she began to think about the implications of this new enemy. What we know so far is minimal, Hera murmured to Mon Mothma as the broadcast continued, her tone carrying an edge. But they're organized. This isn't random aggression. They're probing, looking for weaknesses. Mon Mothma nodded, her voice low. And if they're met with hesitation, we may lose far more than we realize. We need the remaining Imperial sympathizers to understand what they'll risk if they choose to side against us. As the broadcast ended, a cold silence settled over the chamber, broken only by the anxious whispers of senators and military advisors. High above, in the crowded tiers of Coruscant, citizens peered up at the enormous holographic screens that displayed the ominous sight of the alien fleet, whispers of fear passing between them. Far away, in a hidden location on the planet, A figure cloaked in shadow watched the broadcast as well, his piercing red eyes gleaming in the darkened light. Grand Admiral Thrawn leaned forward, his fingers steepled, as he assessed the incoming threat. For now, he would remain hidden, allowing these new players to create the disarray he needed. Soon, he would make his own return, and when he did, he would need the full strength of the Empire's remnants united and prepared. With a cold, heartless stare, Thrawn continued to watch, while remaining hidden from the galaxy. He would wait to see what opportunities would present themselves, knowing that in the confusion, the ruins of the Republic would follow. The Mandalorian base camp. The broadcast was far-reaching and covered over multiple worlds as it filled the center of the Mandalorian encampment. Its casting put intrigue into the gathered warriors. They stood silently, watching as images of the alien fleet and fractured transmissions of the attacks on the Outer Rim played on a loop. The flickering holo revealed a lethal exchange of outer colonies being overwhelmed, brief glimpses of destruction followed by dead silence. Bo-Katan cries crossed her arms, her expression unreadable behind her helmet. Though she projected the composed resolve of a leader, inside, a storm brewed. This isn't some isolated raid. It's a war front expanding into our galaxy, spreading faster than anyone can counter, Bo-Katan finally said, her voice low but carrying the weight of her concern. These invaders, they're disciplined, ruthless. They'll keep coming. If they claim world after world, what's to stop them from sweeping through Mandalorian territory? A younger Mandalorian spoke up, his voice edged with worry. If they can break through the Alliance defenses, what hope do we have on our own? Bo-Katan glanced at him sharply. Mandalorians have survived worse odds and we've always fought to the last, she reminded him. But there's more at stake here than our survival alone. The galaxy itself could be reshaped under this new threat. Another warrior, her voice roughened by years of battle, muttered, "And what about Thrawn? He may not be the one leading, but he won't ignore the advantage this chaos gives him. He's like a Vornsker lying in wait, one slip and he'll pounce." Bo-Katan nodded, her mind drifting back to the stories she'd heard of Thrawn from Sabine, from Ahsoka. Thrawn's been in the shadows too long, biding his time. If he's waiting for the remnants of the Empire to rally, he'll be poised to turn this galaxy upside down the second he has the forces he needs. This new threat is exactly the kind of instability he'd use to his own. She looked out at her assembled Mandalorians, her voice firm. We can't rely on the New Republic alone. We don't know what they plan, or if they even know how to respond yet. I've spoken to Ahsoka. She's searching for Thrawn and Ezra, but there's no guarantee they've discovered anything. They could be chasing shadows for months, years, even. A tense silence followed, the Mandalorians exchanging uneasy glances as the implications sank in. One of the clan leaders spoke up, the harsh rasp of his voice breaking the quiet. What about Skywalker, the Jedi and the others? Surely, if they see what's coming, they'll act. Bo-Katan's expression softened as she considered the Jedi's role in this, and the weight on their shoulders. Luke, Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra. They're powerful, but this is bigger than a few Jedi. They can't fight this threat alone. If they're still hunting Thrawn, they might not even know the scale of this. If they get pulled into a war with Thrawn without support, it could cost us all. She paused, taking a long breath, her gaze steady. If Mandalore is to survive, we'll have to decide our place in this fight. We can't risk being caught between two powers, either the Empire Reborn or this incursion. We'll have to be ready to act when the time comes. The other Mandalorians nodded, their eyes fierce beneath their helmets. They understood what it meant to be prepared for war, but this time, the stakes felt impossibly high. There was a heavy pause, the distant crackling of the hollow filling the quiet. Bo-Katan straightened, her voice resolute. Spread word to the other clans. Prepare them. Whether we stand with the Republic or we fight alone, we'll be ready. And if Thrawn steps out of the shadows, we'll face him head-on. The image of the alien fleet continued to flicker on the hollow, ships moving with cold precision, each one a silent reminder of the darkness gathering on the edge of the galaxy. Mon Mothma sat alone in her dimly lit office, her mind fixed on the Hera's holocron recording. The image of Hera appeared, worn and urgent, with a look of fierce resolve in her eyes. "Thrawn is back," Hera's voice echoed through the quiet room, steady but edged with tension. "And we need to prepare." Behind Hera, grainy footage showed a clandestine meeting in a darkened chamber. There, a familiar figure stepped forward, one Mon Mothma recognized too well. Senator Kayles, speaking in low tones with a cluster of former Imperial officers. The unmistakable insignia of the Imperial emergence glinting on their armor. Mon Mothma's heart sank. Kayles had been one of her closest allies, someone she'd trusted to work toward a lasting order. Yet here he was, standing alongside those who sought only power in chains, those who would welcome Thrawn's resurgence for their own gain. Her face set in grim determination. With Thrawn's return, there was no room for the complacency that had taken root in the Senate. Hera was right, they had to prepare, and now she would see to it that even in a Senate riddled with betrayal, the Republic would stand ready. Mon Mothma took a steadying breath, her gaze fixed on the datapad in her hand. The newly formed bill was the product of late nights, strained alliances, and the knowledge that every second counted. It outlined measures to enhance the Republic's defenses, mobilize fleets, and counteract the Imperial resurgence hinted at in the shadows. Outside her chambers, Hera waited, ready to support her with first-hand accounts of Thrawn's growing threat and the stakes if they failed to act. Mon Mothma knew the path ahead would be met with resistance, but with Hera by her side, she felt secure, resolved to confront a Senate that needed to remember the cost of underestimating danger. The Republic could not afford to repeat history. Mon Mothma's Senate platform drifted forward into the chamber, its hum soft but commanding as it rose to center stage. The rows of hovering Senate pods loomed around her in concentric rings, filled with the gazes of senators, some supportive, others wary, all waiting to hear her proposal. Mon Mothma took a deep breath, her posture straight, shoulders squared, as she steadied herself to present the bill. Hera stood to her right, armored and resolute, her presence a silent testament to the urgency of their cause. In Mon Mothma's hand was the datapad detailing the proposed measures, a call to engineer new starships and to reinstate a network of battle strategies, alliances, and defensive tactics to safeguard against the new threat Thrawn posed from the shadows. She could feel the weight of history and future alike as she prepared to speak, determined to rally the Senate to action before it was too late. "Fellow senators," she began, her tone stern, "we stand at a crossroads in our galaxy's history. Peace, hard-won as it is, now faces threats that reach beyond mere skirmishes or fleeting insurgencies. It has come to our attention that a formidable power, the infamous Grand Admiral Thrawn, has returned, along with forces from beyond our known galaxy. This bill calls for the defense and preservation of our Republic, to commission new starships designed to meet these threats and to develop coordinated strategies to protect our worlds and way of life." She paused, glancing at Hera, then back at the sea of faces. The weight of their future hung heavy in her mind, pressing on her with every breath. "We cannot afford to be complacent. The sacrifices made by countless souls, from the Clone Wars to the Rebellion, were not in vain. We owe it to them, and to every being who trusts in this Senate, to act decisively. The stakes are high, and they demand from us courage and readiness, for if we do not answer this call, then others, those who would see tyranny return, will fill that silent voice with violence." She looked around, a quiet resolve emanating from her. "Let us not become the Senate that allowed peace to crumble by our inaction. We must be ready. The galaxy depends on it." A mix of apprehension and defiance woven into the silence that followed Mon Mothma's final words. Faces turned with concern, others with grim determination, while some senators shared wary glances, the weight of impending conflict stark in their expressions. As the voting consoles activated, a hushed tension filled the air, an unspoken recognition that the outcome of this vote would determine the galaxy's future, whether toward fortified defense or uncertain vulnerability. Senators from countless systems cast their votes on the motion. Hovering in the center of the Grand Hall was a holographic blueprint of the proposed new war-class vessels, shimmering in blue light. Sleek, modern, and fortified designs intended to face the emerging threats looming on the galactic horizon. Members of the Senate, began Senator Alvaron, a human representative from Corellia, his tone sharp and confident, this is a necessary measure. Without these ships we risk being outmatched. The new Republic's strength must extend beyond diplomacy. If we are not prepared for war, then our enemies will seize every opportunity to exploit our peace. But as Alvaron's words echoed through the chamber, they were met with murmurs of dissent. Senator Tala from the agricultural world of Sullust stood to speak next. We've just spent years fighting to rid ourselves of a militarized galaxy. Are we now so quick to rush back into the arms of war? These new ships, funded by newly recruited engineering houses, armed with weapons from manufacturers we hardly know, will they serve the interests of peace, or push us into the very cycle of violence we sought to end? After a tense hour of debate, the Senate cast its vote. When the final tally appeared, the motion was declined. The holographic blueprints faded away, and with them, the hope for a bolstered fleet prepared to face the growing danger. Mon Mothma's face was composed, but worry clouded her eyes as she watched senators leave the chamber. As the others filed out, she signaled Hera, who had been observing from the sidelines. Together, they made their way to a small back room, where a handful of trusted aides awaited. Back room briefing. As the doors slid shut, Mon Mothma released a long, weary breath. This is worse than I'd feared. Even with the new threat on our doorstep, they refused to act. Hera leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her gaze steady but troubled. The Senate's worried about appearing too much like the Empire, about crossing that line. But what good is peace if it can't be defended? This threat isn't just going to vanish. Mon Mothma nodded, frustration seeping into her voice. Their refusal to consider the scale of the threat is exactly what Thrawn would expect from us. He's always understood our weaknesses better than we do. And if he's anywhere near as dangerous as Ahsoka and Ezra believe, we're on the brink of repeating the same mistakes. The alliance is fragile, Hera. I don't even know where some of these senators' allegiances lie anymore. Hera's brow furrowed, and her tone grew serious. With Imperial sympathizers still holding influence in the Republic, we can't assume everyone in that room sees this threat the way we do. Some of them might even welcome a new power if it weakened the Republic's authority. Thrawn knows this too, doesn't he? If he's still out there. Mon Mothma finished the thought, her gaze distant. Then he'll know exactly how to use it against us. The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of all they couldn't say. Hera finally broke it, her voice low and determined. We'll need a contingency plan. For if or when Thrawn strikes. Mon Mothma nodded. You're right. We'll gather a few allies quietly. If the Republic won't be prepared, then we will be. Send word to those you trust. This galaxy fought too hard for freedom to watch it slip away from within. As they left the back room, Mon Mothma's thoughts turned to the fragile peace she had worked so hard to build. She knew it was only a matter of time before they would be tested again, and this time, they would have to stand ready, whether the Senate was prepared or not. Meanwhile, Baylan Skoll stood alone at the edge of a towering, ancient monument carved deep into the mountainside, a monolithic reminder of an age-old power. His armor, dark and well-worn, caught the last rays of Peridia's fading sunlight, casting sharp shadows over his face as he stared at the stone figure before him. Its features were indistinct, but the flowing robes and upraised hand suggested it had once been revered, a gatekeeper of secrets buried in the distant past. His gaze was intense, unflinching, his presence commanding yet haunted by some unnamed purpose. Here, he sensed the well of strength he had sought for so long, an ancient pulse in the force that thrummed with the energy of countless forgotten lives. In the dark corridors of the Night Sisters' lair, Shin Hati knelt before her new mentors, the Night Sisters, their ghostly forms looming over her as they chanted in their native tongue. One of the elder Night Sisters moved forward, brushing her hand over Shin's forehead, leaving behind a faint green mark that began to pulse in rhythm with her heart. The training was grueling. Shin's spirit clashed with the Night Sisters' dark powers, yet her determination burned. They showed her how to harness her raw force abilities, transforming them into a dark, thrumming energy, weaving spells that projected images of her enemies, and binding her senses to the land itself. Every spell drew her deeper, granting her visions of distant battles and strange voices in her mind. Shin began to understand her new power, but there was a darkness within it that both seduced and threatened to consume her. At the same time, Balin descended into the hidden catacombs beneath the monument, a place rarely touched by light, where the walls pulsed with the remnants of ancient energy. These winding tunnels were lined with symbols carved into the stone, a strange blend of Jedi glyphs and Night Sister runes, binding echoes of both light and shadow. As he went deeper, Balin sensed another presence reaching out to him. His thoughts turned instinctively toward Ahsoka, and through the Force, he called out a subtle, wordless invitation that crossed the vast distance between them. In the silence of her meditations on Peridea, Ahsoka felt Balin's call, his presence like a shadow in the light. She reached back, her mind touching his, her curiosity drawn by his depth of knowledge and the purpose he radiated. Guided by their combined connection in the Force, they unlocked sealed chambers and dormant artifacts, relics humming with an energy that surged to life at their touch. Together, they activated the relics, an ancient array of viewing stones and crystals that began to glow, filling the chamber with an ethereal light. In a sudden rush, the crystals projected images in vivid, mystical clarity, glimpses of the galaxy beyond, scenes of battles unfolding, lives lost and saved, as if the Force itself was offering them a vision of reality from a perspective neither had witnessed before. Balin and Ahsoka found themselves entranced, drawn into the visions as they each witnessed the weight of the galaxy's conflict, the threat of the Yuuzhan Vong, and the mounting power of Thrawn. For a brief moment, they saw themselves as mere instruments of the Force, bound to its ebb and flow, caught in a galactic struggle older than both Jedi and Sith. The realization left them both silent, the shared vision lingering between them as they sensed that this knowledge was a warning, a reminder of what was at stake if they did not act. In the stillness of the catacombs, Ahsoka reaches out into the Force, her mind drifting to Sabine, sensing her presence like a distant ember against the shadows. A pang of worry seeps into her meditation, but she steadies herself, trusting that Sabine's resilience will hold, even under Thrawn's supervision. Sabine and Ezra move cautiously through the cold corridors of the starship, both of them on high alert throughout the mission. Sabine feels an echo in her mind of someone calling out, giving attention to the feeling for moments, before losing focus to the bordering sounds around her. Ezra keeps his eyes peeled for any passing patrols or surveillance cams. The ship is vast, a labyrinth of endless walls and countless enemies, every section lit by the soft, ominous glow of Imperial lights. "Remind me why we didn't have a better plan for this part?" Ezra mutters, glancing over at Sabine with a slight smirk. "Because someone thought improvising was a skill," she retorts with a quick grin. But there's tension in her voice, and her gaze sweeps every inch of the corridor ahead, looking for cover or escape routes. As they sneak forward, keeping close to the wall, Sabine stops short, grabbing Ezra's arm. They both freeze as a squad of stormtroopers marches past an adjacent hallway. Holding their breath, they press themselves against a shadowed alcove, hoping the shadows would mask them. Sabine watches intently, eyes narrowed, counting each trooper as they pass, and when they're safely around the corner, she lets out a slow breath. "We need a layout of this place," she whispers. "No way we'll make it far just wandering around." "Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing," Ezra replies, his gaze darting to a nearby control panel embedded in the wall. He reaches out cautiously, his fingers hovering over the screen. "If I can tap into the system, I might be able to pull up a map." Sabine glances down the corridor, keeping watch as Ezra works, his thought in concentration. After a few moments, he nods, and a low-resolution blueprint of the starship comes to life on the screen. He quickly scans the layout, his eyes lighting up as he spots the hangar, their potential ticket out. There, he whispers, pointing. Looks like we're not too far from a maintenance shaft that leads to the lower levels. If we can get through that, we might be able to reach the hangar. Sabine nods, glancing back over her shoulder as if expecting Thrawn himself to materialize. Let's move before they realize we're gone. As they slip through the halls, the reality of their situation begins to weigh on them. They're in the heart of Thrawn's stronghold, surrounded by troopers. Sabine and Ezra, cornered but defiant, make one last stand against the swarm of stormtroopers who encircle them. Sabine, quick on her feet, dodges a trooper's throw and spins, landing a sharp kick to his midsection. Meanwhile, Ezra steps in beside her, seizing the moment to deflect a stormtrooper's arm, twisting it just enough to send the weapon falling to the floor. However, more troopers move forward, wielding shock sticks that crackle with a menacing blare, their silver arcs illuminating the tight corridor. The stormtroopers close in, with their movements methodical. Sabine takes a swing at one, narrowly avoiding the snap of his shock stick, only to be met by another trooper from behind. The jolt hits her squarely in the back, sending a flash of pain through her, and she drops to one knee, momentarily stunned. Ezra, sensing the danger, reaches for her, but a second trooper lands a sharp strike with a shock stick to his shoulder, flooding him with the disorienting shock. He stumbles, vision blurring as he struggles to regain focus. Finally, with another synchronized strike, the troopers manage to subdue them. Sabine and Ezra fall, breathing heavily, both left immobilized as their bodies succumb to the lingering effects of the stun. The stormtroopers secure them, connecting to them a low-power energy field of virtually invisible, high-tension energy tethers. The restraints are designed to restrict movement and prevent any attempts at escape. These tethers can alter their tension dynamically, adjusting to the wearer's motions to maintain control. At rest, the wrist cuffs are drawn close to the torso, limiting arm mobility to only small movements, while a mild electrostatic hum keeps the cuffs strong and stable to tampering. As the captives are brought to the holding area, an Imperial Guard approaches Thrawn as he delivers the report. "The rebels have been captured, sir." Thrawn's look remains focused elsewhere, with his voice calm. "Ensure they are held securely. I have plans for our guests." Chapter 2. In a security post on Coruscant, lower Republic security officers huddle around a listening console, their attention caught by an exchange from within a private senator's chamber dealings. The whispers are fragmented, but the words Thrawn and return pulse through the speakers with a weight that sends chills down their spines. Though none of the officers had encountered Thrawn directly, his name is well known in the darker circles of galactic history, a specter from the Empire's brutal past. For most of them, he exists as a near-mythic figure, a strategic tactician who had outmaneuvered even the most seasoned rebel forces, and someone rumored to possess an intellect as terrifying as his loyalty to the fallen Empire. The officers exchange uneasy glances, torn between a direct response and shadowing these rogue senators. "Should we contain this threat?" one whispers, voice tense. "Or is it more important to tail and track the information they may have on Thrawn's return?" Caught in the gravity of their discovery, they agree to quietly monitor the senators, understanding that the implications of Thrawn's return could shake the Republic to its core. Deep in the outer sectors of Coruscant's industrial precinct, Mon Mothma and Hera Syndulla dispatched a team of seasoned diplomats escorted by a unit of advanced droid guards. The diplomats' mission was vital: to secure the alliance of former Imperial engineers recently absorbed into the new Republic amnesty program. These individuals, once architects of the Empire's technological might, held the knowledge and expertise that could be decisive in the coming struggle. Recent reports from the Rim spoke of a new menace, the Yuuzhan Vong, an unknown species wreaking devastation on the edges of the galaxy, and Mon Mothma knew they would need every resource to confront it. Each diplomat carried an encrypted letter, sealed not only with high-level Republic access codes but with intricate biometric keys unique to each engineer. The droid guards carried small but powerful scanners, sleek, hexagonal devices that whirred quietly with a dim, pulsating purple-green light. As each letter was presented, the droids activated the scanners, projecting a focused holographic field that scanned both fingerprints and retinal patterns with unmatched precision. The scanners used a multi-layered lattice beam to capture the engineer's data in real time, building a three-dimensional map of their biometric signature. This scan was then cross-referenced with the encoded data embedded within the letter. If the scan was an exact match, the letter would unlock itself, the encrypted information streaming into the engineer's holoconsole in an array of symbols, allowing only them to access it. Once the engineers completed their scans, the droids transmitted a silent confirmation back to the diplomatic team, signaling the exchange had gone according to plan. Within each letter, Mon Mothma had laid out the rising urgency and what she termed as a new era of collaboration to bolster the Republic's forces. Hera's briefing contained tactical data on the Outer Rim attacks and projections on Yuuzhan Vong movement patterns, emphasizing how critical the engineer's unique talents could be in devising countermeasures against the incoming storm. As the engineers read, some exchanged worried glances. They knew that their choice to ally with the Republic now meant joining an unpredictable and potentially deadly struggle. The gravity of the mission weighed heavily on the engineers, each realizing the significance of the encoded words. In hushed tones, they agreed to the challenge, but only under the assurance that their insights would remain secret, a quiet partnership forged in the shadow of galactic war. As the diplomats and their droid guards prepared to depart, the engineers slipped their letters into concealed vaults. The complex layers of Republic encryption remained on high alert within the devices, set to detonate if tampered with, evidence of the stakes that lay ahead. From her hidden vantage on Coruscant, Mon Mothma waited for confirmation, knowing that her Republic would soon be armed not only with ships and weapons, but with a coalition of minds ready to stand against the evils that lie before them. Bo-Katan Kryze stood at the edge of the platform overlooking her gathered Mandalorian warriors. Her voice, steady and unyielding, carried over the group with a calm authority that cut through the clamor of preparation. The clang of armor ceased, and the warriors fixed their attention on her as she spoke. "VOD, we are here to uphold the Resolnair, the way of our people," she began, her gaze sweeping over the warriors. "The 6 actions that make us who we are, bound by honor, strength, and loyalty. Before we enter this war, remember what it is to be Mandalorian. This is more than armor and weapons. It's a creed, a way of life that connects us to each other, to those before us, and to those who will carry on after we're gone." She paused, gesturing toward her own Beskar armor, gleaming and weathered by battle. "First, we wear this armor not just for ourselves, but as a symbol of our people. Armor is our second skin, forged from Beskar, our heritage and our shield. Beskargam doesn't just protect us, it declares to our enemies, and to each other, that we stand as one." Bo-Katan's voice rose with fierce pride as she continued. "We speak Mandoe, the language of our people, not simply because we are Mandalorian, but because it connects us. Every word in our tongue carries the strength of our ancestors. When we say warrior in Mandoe, we don't just mean soldier. We mean protector, ally, and clan. This language binds us, across the stars, even when we are far from one another." She met the eyes of the younger warriors, her expression fierce. "Defend yourself, yes, but defend your family as well. When you look around you, see VOD, your brothers and sisters. We train, we fight, and we stand in the line of fire not just for ourselves, but for each other. Remember that when you take up arms." Turning her body toward the seasoned warriors, Bo-Katan nodded gracefully. "To each child we raise as Mandalorian, we pass on our code and our strength. Teach them the Resolnair. War is not just the clash of weapons and armor, It's the loss of families, the destruction of homes, and the devastation it leaves upon the souls of those who survive. We do not go into battle lightly, for every victory comes with a cost. But we fight not because we seek glory or conquest, we fight to protect. To protect our clans, our way of life, and our future. The galaxy around us trembles under the weight of these attacks, some we cannot yet see, but Mandalorians are more than warriors. We are guardians of our people, and if the fires of war come for us, we will face them together, fierce and unyielding, because that is who we are and who we must always be. They must know the path that has been carved before them. Axe Wove stood tall, his stare hard and steady as he looked out over the assembled Mandalorians. The sunlight casting an aura across his armor, light that burned with the intensity in his eyes as he prepared to speak, his voice carrying the edge of a seasoned warrior with a fierce loyalty to his people. Our strength as Mandalorians comes from our unity. Every one of us contributes to the welfare of the clan. You may be a warrior, a hunter, a pilot, an engineer, it does not matter. What matters is that you give what you have to the clan. We survive because of each other's strengths. No contribution is too small. Bo-Katan paused, letting the silence drive home his words. And finally, we answer the call to battle. When the Mandalore calls, we come. Not because we crave war, but because we know that when one of us fights, we all fight. This is our way, and we follow it with honor. Bo-Katan's heart burned with conviction. Today we train. We ready ourselves for battle, for the legacy we carry as Mandalorians. For Mandalore. The warriors around her lifted their fists and echoed, "For Mandalore." Mon Mothma leaned forward, with careful consideration as she examined the encrypted datapad in her hand. The screen displayed complex financial summaries and shell companies carefully arranged across multiple sectors, with legitimate outlier directorships as cover. Beside her, Hera Syndulla studied a map of shipyards spread across neutral and lightly regulated systems. Around the table sat Mon Mothma's financial advisors, discreet representatives of the New Republic's Hidden Funding Initiative, all working under the same understanding. The manufacturing of warships must begin, and it must be done away from prying eyes. Mon Mothma spoke quietly, her voice measured. If we're to avoid the risk of detection, each of these funding routes must look like standard Republic business. Small, scattered operations with nothing to draw attention. We need circular ownership patterns between directors across these shell companies. And we need each company to appear like its primary intent is legal manufacturing for trade, nothing that might flag a large-scale military mobilization. One of the financial advisors, a tall, reserved woman named Sana Drayan, nodded. We've utilized companies with dormant periods, which we can now reactivate under the guise of re-establishing supply chain efforts post-imperial restructuring. However, we have a number of flagged individuals holding numerous directorships. We'll need to carefully arrange their roles to avoid drawing Republic oversight. Hera leaned forward, studying the supply chain and the shipyards identified as potential sites for discrete production. We'll need materials and workers funneled to these yards in stages, she said. Let's stagger the arrival of raw materials, nothing too noticeable all at once. Ship components, tools, and labor contracts have to move slowly to avoid tripping mass registration alerts. Another advisor, adjusting his datapad, looked up with a serious expression. We're also managing jurisdictional risk. Certain systems are open to Imperial sympathies, and we have to navigate that carefully. That means sending production funding through shell companies in unaligned systems, all disguised as standard Republic infrastructure projects, to draw as little attention as possible. In addition, we're looking at outlier ages in the workforce. We'll balance young recruits with experienced engineers who have been through the amnesty program and still know the industry well. Mon Mothma took in each point, nodding in approval as her mind absorbed the enormous complexity of the plan. We need the Republic prepared for this coming threat, she said, her voice steady. No one outside this room must know the truth of what we're building or why. The risk is too great, and if Thrawn and the Imperial remnants are indeed planning, as we fear, we must be ready." Hera looked at her and gave a nod of understanding. "The Vong won't wait, and neither will Thrawn. Whatever happens, we need to be prepared for every possibility, every faction. If these outliers bring any hint of risk, we'll pivot." The room fell into a quiet hum as the advisors returned to their data, each one knowing the stakes if even the smallest financial anomaly could expose the Republic's preparations. Mon Mothma and Hera exchanged a final glance. This was a delicate, dangerous maneuver, but it was the best chance they had to be ready for the war creeping toward them from every direction. Hera stands by the viewport, looking out into the vast expanse, her mind heavy with worry. Sabine and Ahsoka have ventured far beyond the known reaches of the galaxy, into territories uncharted and perilous, and the silence in their absence is deafening. She knows the cost, but the lack of communication gnaws at her, stirring a deep fear that they may be out there, facing dangers beyond anything she can reach or control. Yet, even in the quiet moments of doubt, Hera clings to the hope in their training, hoping their tenacity will bring them back safely. Thrawn makes his way down the corridor, standing in front of the cell, hands clasped behind his back, his calculating gaze drifting over Sabine and Ezra as they sit, restrained, inside the stark, metallic chamber. The hum of the containment field thrums in the background, amplifying the stillness. Sabine's defiant glare meets Thrawn's, but beneath the defiance, exhaustion lingers in her eyes. Ezra, equally worn but resolute, clenches his fists, every muscle tense as he braces for whatever Thrawn might throw at them next. Thrawn's voice is soft, almost detached, as he regards them with the cool precision of an art critic. "It's fascinating, truly," he begins, his tone devoid of any warmth. "The two of you, such enduring loyalty, such resilience. Admirable, yes, but ultimately futile." He allows a pause, as though savoring their reactions, his red eyes gleaming in the low light. "You're each but a thread in a much larger tapestry. And threads, however strong, can be pulled, unraveled." He regards them both for a long moment, as if memorizing every detail, then gives a faint nod, signaling the Edo interrogator droid to proceed. "I'll leave you to it," he says calmly, turning to walk away, his footsteps echoing as he disappears down the corridor. The Itio droid drifts forward, its spherical form hovering silently before them. Mechanical arms extend with surgical precision, the glint of cruelly designed instruments reflecting in its polished surface. It begins its interrogation, prodding Sabine and Ezra with expertly timed questions, alternating between attempts at psychological manipulation and painful, strategic stimulations to weaken their resolve. Sabine clenches her jaw, sweat beading on her forehead, while Ezra bites back his frustration, both of them refusing to yield. Hours pass as they resist, mentally and physically worn, their breathing shallow and bodies limp. Eventually, the droid halts, assessing their conditions. They are alive but battered, barely clinging to consciousness. Their cuffs finally release, and troopers step in, gathering their weakened forms to take them to the medical bay, where medics work swiftly to stabilize them. Developed in secret by the Imperial Department of Military Research, these interrogator droids are crafted to exploit every weakness, mental, physical, emotional, leaving even the most hardened prisoners vulnerable. For now, Sabine and Ezra remain intact, but the Empire's methods have taken their toll, and they're left to recover, unconscious, for whatever might come next. In the stillness of the catacomb, Ahsoka's connection to the Force feels heavier, charged, as though the ancient stones around her live with the memories of 1,000 untold stories. Balin stands nearby, his presence both an anchor and a barrier as she sinks deeper into her meditation, seeking clarity in the uncertainty. The darkness presses in, but Ahsoka's focus sharpens, her consciousness reaching out across the vastness of the Force, past the familiar strands that bind her to Sabine and Ezra, into a distant, unknown frontier. And then, like a beacon in the dark, Ahsoka senses Sabine, but not the Sabine she has known. This Sabine radiates an ethereal strength, a luminous presence bound in deep knowledge and raw, unfiltered power. It's as if Sabine has crossed a threshold into something larger, something older, and her essence resonates with an understanding of the Force that transcends Ahsoka's own experiences. Ahsoka can feel Sabine's power echo through her mind, as if Sabine is one with the ancient energies of the beyond, a being woven from the very fabric of the galaxy's mysteries. Through this spectral connection, Sabine speaks, her voice both familiar and infused with something foreign, an authority drawn from this other realm. She calls to Ahsoka, instructing her to channel the Force into healing, to reach out and breathe life into Sabine and Ezra's battered forms. Ahsoka feels a sudden warmth, a vibrant energy flow into her hands, as if Sabine herself is guiding the process, feeding her strength into Ahsoka's own abilities. Sabine's essence seems to flow into Ahsoka, weaving her strength with Ahsoka's own in a profound unity of power and purpose. In that moment, Ahsoka understands. Sabine has unlocked something extraordinary, a connection to a part of the Force that few have ever touched. Trusting in this deeper guidance, Ahsoka releases herself into the current, allowing the Force to flow from her, to bridge the physical distance separating her from her friends. With each breath, she senses Sabine and Ezra's essence revitalizing, their wounds mending, the Force healing them both as it moves through her, a silent promise that no matter the distance, the Force will unite them. Ezra's eyes open, and he blinks against the sterile brightness of the medical bay. He feels a strange lightness, the aching from their capture now completely gone. Beside him, Sabine is already stirring, her hand moving instinctively to her side, surprised to find no bruises or wounds. She looks over at him, and they share a brief, silent acknowledgement. Somehow, someone has healed them. They take in their surroundings. The medical bay, deserted and quiet, is lined with supply cabinets, medical scanners, and sleek equipment. As they stand, a nearby cabinet catches Sabine's eye, its contents revealing rows of Imperial stealth shields. She raises an eyebrow and grins. These will come in handy. Ezra nods, grabbing a shield device and affixing it to his wrist, feeling a new surge of confidence as they conceal themselves in stealth gear. Moving quickly and silently, they slip out of the bay and into the armory nearby, where they stumble upon a cargo manifest on a datapad. Sabine snatches it, scrolling through, until she stops, eyes narrowing as she reads their destination, a world on the edge of known space, far from any central Imperial authority. She hands it to Ezra, her mind already racing through the possibilities. With a plan forming, they sneak into the hangar and board a small freighter loaded with cargo containers. Each crate is tightly sealed, but it'll give them the cover they need until they reach their destination. For now, Sabine and Ezra settle into the shadows, concealing themselves for whatever awaits on this unknown world, and for the next chance to outwit the Empire. Massive star destroyers in various stages of construction, their dark hulls glinting under the artificial lights of the yard's orbital structure. TIE fighters patrol the perimeter, weaving in and out of formation as Sabine narrows her eyes, assessing their patterns and routes. Not exactly a soft target, Ezra mutters, glancing at Sabine as she studies the yard schematics on the datapad. The map shows the layout of the docking ports, warehouses, and security checkpoints, all heavily monitored and guarded by elite stormtrooper unit. Their freighter moves quietly, blending into the background traffic of supply and cargo transports, but they know that blending in only buys them time. Sabine leans forward, her finger tracing a maintenance hangar nestled near the core of the ring. If we time it right, we can dock here and slip out while they're refueling. We'll have to stay low, keep our stealth shields up, and move fast. She hands the datapad to Ezra. We're after the Quat data logs on Imperial fleet movements, intel that could give the rebellion a fighting chance. Ezra nods, his focus sharpening as he visualizes their path through the maze of corridors and security zones. Once we have the logs, we'll need a fast way out. This place is crawling with troopers, and the last thing we want is to be trapped in the core of an Imperial stronghold. They exchange a look of determination as the Quat drive yards come closer, knowing that this mission could tip the scales in the rebellion's favor, or end with them deep in the Empire's grasp. The freighter begins its descent, moving into position for docking as Sabine and Ezra prepare to step into the heart of Imperial power, relying on wit, stealth, and a shared trust in each other to survive. Thrawn stands before a holographic projection of his Shadow Council, his eyes coldly focused addressing the council members. His voice is smooth, almost too calm, as he explains his latest strategy, a campaign of propaganda designed to sway the Senate and the galaxy at large. Through carefully crafted press agencies and subtly manipulated editorials, Thrawn orchestrates a narrative. Reports of Republic conspiracies, military oversights, and whispers of officials sympathetic to Republic dissidents. Thrawn's outlets insinuate that Republic negligence is allowing mysterious threats to slip through their defenses, subtly stirring fear among systems and leaving the Senate questioning their current security measures. To the Shadow Council, Thrawn frames this as a tactical necessity. Through calculated pressure and public doubt, the Republic will start to buckle under the pressure of the people and beg for a stronger defense on all borders, even if they are denied, which draws them closer to siding with Imperial ideals. He says, his voice tinged with icy satisfaction. They'll enact blockades, drawing their strength to the outer reaches and leaving the inner defenses exposed. Our covert agents will wreak havoc from within, when the time comes. The council members nod, some with hesitation, but most with satisfaction as they realize this gambit will consolidate Imperial influence. An Imperial officer approaches Thrawn in the command room, his voice taut with urgency. "Sir, I'm afraid Ezra Bridger and Sabine Wren have managed to escape the medical bay. Security forces are sweeping the area, but it appears they've eluded containment." Thrawn's expression remains impassive. He pauses, as if recalibrating, and then speaks in a low tone. "Let them run," he says, almost to himself. "They'll lead us to precisely what we need. All comms are tapped, and even if they make one call we will know." Thrawn sees the escape not as a setback but as an opportunity, a carefully laid trap to gather insight on the Republic's growing unease and Hera's concerns, especially where Sabine's loyalty to her is concerned. He intends to use Ezra and Sabine's freedom to watch them, listen closely to their exchanges, and uncover the fissures in the Republic's sense of security, where he can sow fear and division. Thrawn stands in front of his tactical droid, looking to each screen around him, seeing the representation of complete control over the surrounding 50-mile radius. Ensure every console, every comlink, and data port within range is tapped into our network. Sabine and her companion may think they're free to communicate, but every word, every whisper will come directly to us, he says, his voice calm yet charged with chilling precision. Thrawn's gaze sharpens as he continues. If their freighter is spotted, instruct all units to stand down. Let them believe they are slipping through undetected. We must project the illusion of freedom, the semblance of their independence, while in reality, every step they take is dictated by our watchful eyes. He pauses, allowing the weight of his command to settle. Chapter 3. Republic Conspiracy. The Tarkin Initiative, born under the ambition of Governor Wilhuff Tarkin, continued to evolve after his death, transforming into a powerful, secretive think tank within the remnants of the Empire. After Tarkin's demise on the first Death Star, the initiative refocused its objectives, no longer merely a tool for Tarkin's ego but a clandestine group intent on securing the Empire's survival at any cost. Officers who once answered to Tarkin and director Orson Krennic, whose rivalry had shaped the initiative's early days, quietly persisted, working to develop the next generation of devastating technology. Protected by elite death troopers and Imperial intelligence's most loyal operatives, the initiative survived the fall of the Empire, slipping further into secrecy as it prepared for the future. For Thrawn, the continued existence of the Tarkin Initiative was crucial. His Shadow Council knew that if Thrawn was to fulfill his vision of a resurgent empire, it would require the technological advancements and dark strategies the Initiative was capable of devising. Recognizing Thrawn's tactical genius, the remaining officers within the initiative aligned their goals with his, developing new weapons and battle strategies that could counter the Republic and any other galactic powers that stood in his way. As whispers of Thrawn's impending return circulated among Imperial loyalists, the initiative's work accelerated, driven by the anticipation of a new order where Tarkin's ideals of order and control would take root in Thrawn's vision. For Thrawn's Shadow Council, the Tarkin Initiative represented more than just a legacy. It was the bedrock on which they would build the next age of Imperial dominance, a future that would see the galaxy united or conquered under Thrawn's command. Thrawn stood aboard his flagship's observation deck, watching the holomap display with intensity. On the edge of the map, red indicators showed the extent of the Yuuzhan Vong's brutal advance through the Outer Rim, entire worlds falling under their onslaught. Despite the destruction, Thrawn's expression was one of quiet satisfaction as he traced the growing path of devastation. One of his Shadow Council advisors spoke, a hint of tension in his voice. "Grand Admiral, the Vong are pressing toward more populated sectors. We could intervene here, use it as a rallying point. Imperial loyalists would flood back to our ranks if we were the ones to save them from this terror." Thrawn's red eyes shifted thoughtfully to his advisor. "Patience," he replied, his voice smooth and steady. "If we engage now, we squander our position of invisibility. Instead, let the galaxy witness the Republic's inaction, their inability to protect the very worlds they swore to defend. The longer they struggle, the more favorable the sentiment will be toward a return to order." He tapped the holomap, zooming into a sector where Imperial remnants were scattered but loyal, biding their time. "But we do not sit idle. Dispatch messages through our intelligence bureau proxies, framing Republic soldiers as scapegoats for the failing defense of these worlds. Leaked evidence, subtle but potent enough to suggest a Republic conspiracy, should begin appearing in holonet channels across these Outer Rim systems. If we cultivate discontent among civilians, they will be primed to seek new leadership." "Sir," another officer said, an edge of concern in his voice, "what of the Imperial loyalists asking for aid now? They want a rallying point, something tangible. They're ready to take up arms." Thrawn nodded thoughtfully. "The time will come," he said, his tone unwavering. "But not yet. Instead, we shall arrange a series of covert rallies, spread rumors of underground gatherings, talks of restoring the order and stability the Empire once offered. Allow this unrest to grow but under our watchful eye. And, to keep the Republic's attention scattered, I want targeted attacks on minor Republic supply lines. We'll frame these as the work of renegade Republic forces sympathetic to the Vong, deserters who believe this new threat cannot be vanquished. The seeds of doubt will take root." One of the council members leaned forward, looking eager. "And when both sides are sufficiently weakened?" Thrawn allowed himself a rare, subtle smile. "Only then, when the galaxy is tired of its incompetence and desperation has set in, do we reveal ourselves as the solution. A united empire, stronger than ever. But mark my words, we will not waste our forces on a two-front war. We will let the Yuuzhan Vong and the Republic grind one another down. And when both sides reach their breaking point—" He paused, his red eyes gleaming. "We shall be the only power prepared to step in, bringing a swift, decisive end to the conflict, and we will do so as heroes." The council members nodded, captivated by his ruthless clarity. Thrawn's words settled over them, solidifying their confidence. They understood. The Republic's failure would be their renewal, and by the time the galaxy realized their consequences, it would be too late. In the darkened chamber, the Shadow Council convenes, their holographic forms across the way. With Thrawn absent, a rare unease underlies their discussion, the weight of their secretive responsibilities palpable. Each member, shrouded in the anonymity of shadows, understands the stakes. Preparing the galaxy for Thrawn's impending return demands subtlety, manipulation, and a cohesion that runs deeper than even their imperial allegiance. One counselor speaks first, his voice low. We must ensure that the groundwork of the cryptocracy remains stable. Our influence, media, corporate holdings, and, most critically, our positioning in the Senate, cannot afford even a whisper of exposure. The galaxy's elected officials are pawns, held by their own ignorance, but we must keep them at ease, unaware of the true strings we pull. Another member nods slowly, their tone sharp. Agreed. However, we are still vulnerable without full control over the economic arms. Our assets in resource sectors remain fragmented, and until they're integrated, Thrawn's plans will be lacking in financial support. It's imperative we funnel funds into weapons development and through back channels, into pro-imperial alliances under the guise of Republic-sanctioned support. A third counselor interjects, with subtle frustration. Yes, but Thrawn's entry demands a strategic political opening. We must prepare the Senate for instability, weaken the Republic unity from within. Their bureaucrats are already fractured, torn between core world policies and the outer rim dissenters. We can deepen these divides. Silence settles for a moment, the weight of their intentions heavy. Another member finally speaks, their tone certain. Thrawn's reemergence must be nothing short of ideal, a mobilized unveiling where our shadow government aligns seamlessly to support his authority. Let the Republic feel their grip slipping while we quietly take full control. A collective moment of silence fills the chamber as everyone turns to themselves and their duties, knowing what must be done individually. Media manipulation, economic destabilization, military alliances, all finely tuned instruments in the symphony they intend to play. Thrawn's arrival is only the beginning. Their role as the invisible hand of the Empire will finally undertake one of its most daring challenges. The Mandalorian clans train with a fierce intensity that resonates through the entire encampment, each warrior fully committed to honing their skills. In pairs and small groups, Mandalorians of various clans clash in sparring matches, the air filled with the sounds of grunts, clanging beskar, and the rapid footwork of battle-hardened soldiers. Their movements are relentless, precise, and unforgiving. No one holds back, as if each training bout were a life-or-death scenario. In one corner, a group practices with blasters, firing at droid targets while dodging return fire, their armor scuffed from countless sessions but reflecting the warrior's pride in each scratch. While a cluster of Mandalorians fight hand-to-hand, grappling in close quarters, testing one another's strength, speed, and resilience. The effort is grueling, yet no one falters, pushing through fatigue, bruises, and sweat as they fight to prove their worth. The Mandalorians fight with a shared intensity that binds them together, each strike and block reinforcing their loyalty to one another. In these training sessions, there is no doubt about their strength as a collective. They are warriors, united in their dedication to the ways of Mandalore, their eyes dead set with the purpose to protect one another and reclaim their shared legacy. Bo-Katan stands with her arms crossed, her mind distant as she looks out over the camp, watching the younger Mandalorians spar. "You realize, Din," she begins, her voice steady but edged with a hint of weariness, "charging into battle without the Republic or any allies means we're truly on our own. No backup, no reinforcements if things go wrong. It's just us." She pauses, glancing at him. "We've done it before, yes, but this time the odds are against us. We're fighting not just for ourselves but for our entire people, for our home." Din nods slowly as he considers her words. "I know. But our strength has never come from outside help. The Mandalorians have always fought for what was ours, even when we stood alone. Allies or not, we rely on each other first." He looks around at the gathered clans, the colors of different houses blending together. "Besides, we're stronger when we're united, when we're reminded of what we're fighting for. The Republic wouldn't understand that. They fight for politics and borders. We fight for survival, for the very soul of Mandalore. And that gives us something more powerful than any army the Republic could send." Bo-Katan cries, looks to him, acknowledging his words as something she may have felt, had she been born to that old regime, a faint smile pulling her in another direction to figure out what actually needs to be. If the numbers were high, it would spell decimation for the little that remains, and despite the risks, Din and his words would not be enough. On a Holonet broadcast, the host, a well-dressed news anchor, looks into the camera with a solemn expression as she introduces the day's topic: the question of increased blockades in response to the Yuuzhan Vong threat. In recent weeks, the galaxy has seen a rise in discussions among senators and world leaders considering whether blockades are the only viable way to protect their people from the encroaching dangers. She begins. The screen shifts to images of senators in debate chambers, some passionately arguing, others looking contemplative and uncertain. A panel of experts appears on the split screen: a retired military strategist, a political analyst, and a representative from a humanitarian organization. The military strategist speaks first, explaining, blockades could help in limiting the Yuuzhan Vong's ability to advance. But wars, especially those fueled by blockades, come with significant consequences: loss of life, displacement of civilians, and violation of human rights. We must consider what it means to invite these dangers directly to our worlds. The humanitarian representative nods, adding, blockades may slow down the threat, but they won't address the real costs. Wars damage infrastructure, weaken economies, and leave entire generations struggling. This isn't just a matter of military strategy, it's a matter of our people's survival. The analyst offers a final perspective, stating, blockades may seem like a solution now, but the collateral damage, from environmental destruction to the spread of disease, could change the very fabric of our societies. And if the Yuuzhan Vong escalate their efforts, we risk turning our worlds into battlegrounds and inviting an existential threat to the galaxy. The broadcast fades to images of recent devastation and overcrowded medical centers, leaving viewers to question if the galaxy can afford the price of these choices, or if another path must be sought. Watching from her chambers with interest is Mon Mothma, waiting to see the political unfold. The people of the galaxy now grow uneasy, politicians clamor for stronger border security, and, with every editorial and broadcast, the seeds of doubt in the Republic's competency spread. The shadow forces gain momentum, and with it, the galaxy teeters on the edge, unknowingly poised for invasion by the very threat the imperialists claim to defend against. We are not acting fast enough, and because of it, we will pay the price. Hera stands at a military bunker preparing Republic soldiers for outreach missions and humanitarian aid. Some of the worlds are on the verge of collapse from economic disaster, and in an effort to garner favor with failing Republic relations, the Senate has passed a motion to take action in a peaceful and respectful manner that aligns with the goals for future alliance. Hera, everything is moving in an orderly fashion. However, it seems someone from the Quat Drive Yards is trying to contact us, and by us I mean you. It's an Imperial frequency, but we managed to play it back after intercepting it. Hey, race the holodisk, someone named Sabine? Says the Republic informant. Sabine? Said Hera, turning her head to the side slightly in question and in thought. She's back already? Hera thought to herself, and I missed the call. Do you have the channel for the transmission signal? Yes, we do, General. However, it was broadcasted from a viewport console. All we have is an ID registration band that could possibly link you to their shuttle or comms device if they are registered in Imperial forces. Republic informant, that's the only way they can make calls? Hera, exactly. But General, how do you know it isn't a trap? Republic informant, Sabine just returned from the unknown regions of the galaxy. She'll have information on whether this threat is real or not. Hera stood at one of the military base's command units where she would make her call to Sabine, hoping the shuttle they were on was in their control and not under Imperial order. Aboard the ship, Sabine recognizes the code for Republic lines and opens comms to talk as Ezra takes the ship up to enter into enemy military air lanes, going up into the traffic lanes to evade stormtroopers and TIE fighters on patrol. Sabine catches sight of the Republic signal flashing on the comm panel. Her heart skips as she quickly opens the channel, leaning forward. Hera, it's us, she says, her voice a mix of relief and urgency. Sabine, it's wonderful to finally hear from you, but is it true? Is he back? Hera, Sabine begins, her voice steady but serious. Thrawn is back. He's stronger, more vigilant than ever, and he's already setting things in motion to destabilize the Republic. Hera's face hardens, and she nods, determination flashing in her eyes as she replies, "It's getting worse for the Republic, Sabine." Hera, feeling like the faults in the Republic will materialize right before her. The Republic is unraveling. Financial stability is crumbling as funding slips through bureaucratic fingers, and the core values we've fought to uphold, freedom, unity, trust, are being called into question. Senators are so tangled in self-serving agendas that our medical institutions go underfunded, left to fend for themselves while vital research and public health fall apart. We weren't gone that long, how could this all have happened? Hera stops to breathe momentarily. A new threat has emerged, Sabine, a species called the Yuuzhan Vong. Imperial forces are sanctioning commercial sectors. Once strong industries are now collapsing under their pull, and there's political corruption on all sides. Small groups are starting to not trust the system anymore. The Senate's budget is a mess. Credits meant to stabilize the galaxy are funneled into pet projects and special interests, leaving essential resources stretched thin or, worse, non-existent. If this continues, there won't be a republic left to save. We're looking at a government collapsing from the inside, and I fear that it's exactly what our enemies want.